Welcome in. Badgers and Miami of Ohio going to be on the field tomorrow night to open the season. Jesse, it's been a long off season, longest off season, but it's almost done.
This is an exciting moment. We've been on the cusp of actual football for so long, and now we're a little over 24 hours away. So I'm eager to see what this Wisconsin team looks like because you and I obviously spend all offseason talking about it. Now we get to see what the product is on the field.
We have all these little milestones, right? Like in the off season of this year, and obviously no bowl game, but bowl game, and then winter conditioning, and then spring practice, and then summer workouts, and then Big Ten media days, and then fall camp, and then the end of fall camp and game week. And we're right here now getting ready for an actual game. They will be on the field tomorrow night under the lights at Camp Randall. They're favored by 17.5. We're going to get to our picks a little bit later on. We already made our season predictions last week. Maybe we'll reinforce those here at some point in the show in case one of ours has changed based on what we learned this week. Probably not. But we're going to get to those picks at the end of the year. Also going to get into a little bit more of who's got the most pressure on them this year. I don't know that we necessarily discussed that during our season preview, but your article up at Badger Connect for – was that Tuesday, talking about Mike Tressel and the defense. We'll get into maybe some of what is who is under pressure and whether they can come through here as the season gets started. But we want to start with, as we have throughout the last year, right? That was just last year. I don't know if we did it the year before. But what does success look like on Thursday night against Miami of Ohio?
I said this on the last show, and maybe it's not fair, but a total butt whooping, I think, is a good start. And I want to acknowledge, because we're probably going to get into more of the specific matchup. Miami, Ohio, traditionally, good program. I think the fact you've got a coach in Chuck Martin who has a winning culture, even if it's a roster that's been turned upside down like most college programs, you have to take that into consideration. Miami was 20-8 the last 2 years. They're 14-2 in the MAC over that time. So they know how to win games. Having said all that, you went and made all these changes if you're Wisconsin in the offseason. You say you want to be more physical, burly, run first, establish the tone. I think the guys who were here the last 2 years, I realize there are fewer of those these days, they know what happened in the opener. You're getting into the second half and the game is close and you're wondering, is this what it's going to be like this season? So they've certainly talked about setting that tone early and just not letting Miami of Ohio hang around. So to me, it's not just winning, which ultimately we know is the most important factor. It's how you win. And I think if the Badgers can win going away, it will give the group confidence, but also give everybody else confidence and fans confidence that something has the potential to be different this year. I just think that's so important.
I agree. And I was on, you're on with Bill Michaels on our network every week. And he asked me the same question. And I was like, well, me and Jesse kind of talked about the camp, and domination, the word domination keeps coming up. But I think more to the point, as you were just laying out, it's how it happens, and giving your team a little bit of momentum, giving your team a little bit of confidence. And look, Miami, Ohio, as you said, is not a bad program. They were picked to finish second here in the MAC. I think those predictions are really, really tough because even as much as Wisconsin turns over and Division One and like the top programs turn over, the programs further down turn over significantly. And while a lot of guys are going up to come into Power 4 programs, a lot of Power 4 guys going down. And Miami, Ohio has quite a few of them, especially on the offensive side. And we'll dive into that in a second. But I think what Wisconsin needs to do tomorrow night is not look like it has the first 2 years in these non-conference games, where it ended up being what we saw in those non-conference games kind of ended up being who they were, right? The struggles to stop the run, the struggles to get off the field at times, the struggles to pass the ball and be dynamic and explosive plays in the passing game. We saw that the last 2 years in those games. And then also, obviously, the inability to run it at will against teams that shouldn't be able to stop you. Again, I'm not saying Wisconsin's going to do that tomorrow night, but it would at least give you a little bit of hope that it's a possibility. And it's so much wait and see at this point because of what has happened and occurred over the last 2 years for you. I would assume for you as well.
Very much so. And I do think I was talking to Ben Barton about this last night, that he's a 6-year senior, so he was around before all this craziness that college football has become. He said at a certain time, you would have a better sense of who you were going to line up with. You'd lose 17 or 18 seniors. You'd bring in 17 or 18 freshmen. Maybe the number's 20, whatever. And now Wisconsin lost 40 plus players. They brought in 40 plus players. And he said, I'm looking around at my D line and I'm going to be playing with these guys for the first time ever in a game. He's saying, I want to see what Charles Perkins' mindset is. What does Javier Suggs look like? How does Parker Peterson defend the run? And so this is true for every program, but since we're Wisconsin specific, there's going to be a feeling out process for the Badgers, even if it's an opponent that presumably you think they should overwhelm, that we didn't see in the same way, I don't think, in years past. So sometimes it can take a little bit of time. I just know that there's going to be a little bit of nail biting action going on if you get into the third quarter and it's close again, because you're right, Zach. I think people will start to wonder, well, what does this mean? Every game in college football is so important because it's like an indictment on where a program stands. That's why I love college football with 12 regular season games. And so you begin to wonder, what does this mean? And we saw the last 2 years what it meant, that they were not going to be particularly good.
Yes, would totally agree with that. And it's not like the Wisconsins of old didn't have a few of these games too, right? Like where they would, I'm specifically thinking back to 2016 with Georgia State, right? Like where you needed Alex Hornibrook to come in and help you win that game in the third quarter. And that team obviously turned out to be, what did I say, 26? Yeah, that team turned out to be pretty darn good, right? But they also dominated teams. And that just hasn't happened in the non-conference for Wisconsin. And you need the confidence built heading into, you need confidence built these first 2 weeks. And you said, yeah, it's not just winning, it's showing that something's different. And that'll be significant. So that's what success looks like. Let's dive into a little bit of what the Miami, Ohio looks like. And we have talked about it before, but Dequan Finn is going to be a huge challenge for them. He's a guy that a lot of Power 4 teams were after, from going when he was leaving Toledo to go to wherever it was going to be. Wisconsin was in that mix. But he ends up at Baylor, but there were a number of Power 4 teams that were coming after him, and he just didn't have a very good he got dinged up early for Baylor, and it just never worked. And now he's back in the MAC, where he was the MAC Player of the Year in 2023, and he's got over 7,000 yards of passing in his career. He's got nearly 18 or more than 1,800 yards rushing in his career. And I believe he's about 27 or 28.
Yeah, he's like a 7th-year senior. It's pretty wild. And 2 off seasons ago, Wisconsin was very interested in him potentially being the future at quarterback for the Badgers. They brought him in, and it was Tyler Van Dyke, and Wisconsin went with Van Dyke. So there is some familiarity with this staff about what Finn can do. Now, that was at Toledo. But as Luke Fickell said on Monday, he believes this offense is perhaps a better fit for him at Miami, Ohio than it was at Baylor, and that maybe he'll be able to do some of the things he did when he was at Toledo. You're right, Zach. There's a dynamic playmaking ability with him. He's the only quarterback in Toledo history to pass for more than 2,000 yards and run for more than 500 yards in multiple seasons, and he did it 3 seasons in a row. So will that show up in a matchup like this? Remains to be seen, but you know that you've got a very talented quarterback who's confident, and it's not like a freshman who's coming in making his first start. Yeah, I know that it's a struggle to figure out when you're doing film study, how do we prepare for this team when we don't have any cut-ups of what this 11 on the field looks like? But you've got enough of Dequan Finn to know what he can present in some of the challenges. And so this is going to be, I think, as first games go, a tremendous test for Wisconsin's defense. So we can see, all right, you've got a mobile quarterback who can get out on the edges, who can make something happen when a play breaks down. Do you have the playmakers defensively to match up with some of that speed? Can you get off the edge? Can you get some tackles for loss after this defense was last in the country in that category a year ago? So I think this is really important for the front in particular, because you don't want to have Finn just running around and kind of gashing guys, and then you can't get off the field.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a huge challenge. And as I mentioned before, They do have some Power 4 talent, or at least guys that were in Power 4 programs that transferred down because, as I said, it goes the other way. Guys go down to these programs and other ones go up. And they've got a guy in Deion Colsey from Notre Dame. He's only 21 career catches, but they also have Keith Reynolds, who came from Washington, Darian Williams, who came from Florida State. Their running backs are their top running backs are gone, but they got a couple of bruisers back there in Jordan Brunson and Kenny Tracy. And then you have tight ends and the guy from Iowa, Grant Leaper, and Brody Cozen from Indiana, who didn't play at those two schools, but they at least got to those schools before, right? They were good enough to get to those schools before then, obviously not playing and coming down a level. I think where the biggest question for Miami, Ohio is along the offensive line, where they're going to be playing a ton of new guys and guys that have not played. And when you talk about Wisconsin's defensive line and getting after it and making it difficult on Dequan Finn, that is where I think is the biggest challenge Miami's going to face is Wisconsin's defensive line and all those new faces that they have on their line.
It's a great opportunity for Wisconsin's D-line. As we mentioned before, you look at the season opening depth chart for Wisconsin, and there are 6 interior defensive linemen listed in that 2 deep, separated by oars. But that's because all 6 are going to play. And another thing that Barton was talking about was by the end of last year, the D-line, he said, we're playing with 4 guys. And so it was always 2 guys are on, 2 guys are off, but those 2 are always waiting to get on the field. And he said, now we're in a situation where you can have 2 on, 2 off, and 2 who are just completely resting, don't even have to think about being on their toes because they're on the cusp of going in. And that is going to allow that group to be more fresh over the course of a season and even over the course of a game like this. So can we see those guys create an occasional TFL or open some holes so you can free up some of these other defenders? Yeah, absolutely. This is the kind of game where you can show, here's what we've been working on all offseason. Here's why we're different.
Yeah. So that is, Wisconsin's defense facing that. And the other thing is they're going to be playing, Wisconsin is going to be playing likely some young guys, especially in the secondary, where at the corner spot, whether it's Emilio Agard or Deone Hill. And then, they get Ricardo Hallman back. He says he's 100%, missed some time in fall camp with a little bit of an ankle thing, but he's 100% ready to go. But I'm intrigued to see how those guys on the outside, specifically Hill and Agard, hold up against a passing attack that could potentially be explosive with Dequan Finn. But keeping Dequan Finn in the pocket now, as opposed to, this is what Ricardo Hallman said. Again, I have not watched the tape as much as he has, but in terms of Finn, more of a scrambler than or a guy who's looking to extend more so than design runs. But this is a new offense, so we'll see exactly this. But they have to do a good job keeping him in the pocket because it could be a long day if he's just taking off and running every time. But
yeah, very, very much so. I mean, he's obviously the engine that runs this whole ship, and if he can get going, then the last thing you want to do is give a team like that hope when, look, the atmosphere is going to be electric. It's a season opener. It's 8-10. They've got the light show. I think it will be. I'm not suggesting it's Wisconsin versus Ohio State, but people are ready to see this team and ready to see it. And so if Miami's hanging around, then it'll suck some of the energy out. And so you just don't want that.
On the other side of the ball for Wisconsin, being able to run it against a smaller Miami, Ohio team, that doesn't always necessarily mean everything, right? Like size, like if guys are quicker and all that good stuff. But Wisconsin has to be dominant in the run game and not turn the ball over. That to me, and that was the one bugaboo with Billy Edwards, I should say, towards the second half of last year, was making those disaster plays. Is that the words that Kenny Guyton is using? Or what is it?
He called them disaster decisions, which was something he was talking about with the whole quarterback room. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, not a good offensive line and not a good run game, and so that's supposed to be what Wisconsin's strength is this year.
I was going to say, do we know if he has those at Wisconsin?
We don't, but it's supposed to be the strength. And so if Wisconsin lives up to what the discussion has been this offseason, then it ought to take some of the pressure off him where you don't have to get in some of those, as many of those third and long situations. And this is such an important game for Dylan Jones, Darian Dupree, because now you're under the microscope and the spotlight in a way that you haven't been. Yes, Darian got a handful of carries last year as the number 2. The most carries he had in a game was 11. We mentioned before, Dylan Jones hasn't carried more than 16 times in his college career because he only played in 3 games. So if those are your top 2 and whatever Cade Giacomelli's role looks like, you're putting a whole heck of a lot more on those guys. And for as much talent as there is, as Luke said, you got to go out and perform now. Now you got to go do it.
Yeah, they lost some guys on defense. Miami, Ohio did. But last year, I think they were ranked in the top 20 in points per game allowed. They were pretty good stopping, or I should say pretty good forcing turnovers. And so those are at least have to acknowledge it as we look at this group. And we'll see. Just give us something. Give us something to at least that you can hang your hat on and know that you can count on, because I don't think that they had that last year. I'm talking specifically on offense. I don't know that they've had that either the last 2 years, except when Braylon was healthy. And that was very rare through no fault of his own. But that was very rare the previous year. So just find something that you do well and do it. And that seems so simple, and yet has been very hard to achieve the last 2 years. So we'll see. All right, let's move on here and talk a little bit of who this season under the most pressure. Coach, player. I may be leading this a little bit too much based on the name that we had talked about at the beginning of the show, Mike Tressel and the defense. But you wrote an article about the defense and the struggles that it's had. For you, coach or player, who's under the most pressure this year?
I think ultimately it has to be Mike Tressel. I could say Billy Edwards Jr., but if it doesn't go well, or if it goes well, this is his only year here. He's going to move on no matter what. Whereas if you're a head coach, you're employed with the hope that you will continue to be employed long-term. And look, Luke Fickell, as we've talked about, there's probably 4 years on the table there. And then you see what happens. Jeff Grimes just got here. Position coaches, I can't say that they're under more pressure than the coordinator. This defense has not been good enough the last 2 years. And Mike Tressel was brought here to try and continue that standard that he established at Cincinnati. I know we've referenced this, but I mentioned it in the story that the second sentence that he used when he met with us for the first time in January 2023 was that idea of so-called mesh the elite, where you take what Cincinnati did well as a pass defense. They were number 2 in the country, with what Jim Leonard did with the number 1 run defense, and nothing about what's happened this year. I don't have to use the E word. If you don't like it, I can see you squirming. But the point is, they've not been good these 2 years. And they've gotten worse. Like, I know if you were 120th in the country in defense and you saw, oh, the total defense 1 year was 39th and it was 41st, you'd say, well, that's not terrible. But Wisconsin was a top 10 defense for a decade plus. Over the last decade, they averaged number 7 defense in the country in total defense. They were in the top 7, 8 out of the last 10 years before this group got here. Now, some of it has to be schematic, coaching. Some of it is personnel. How many NFL guys have they had on defense? Not maybe as many as they had before, but you also have to put them in a position to be successful. And then we're 91st in the country in run defense last year and 60th in yards per play allowed. So that's a big reason why they made these changes. I feel better about the structure of the defense. Certainly Luke Fickell does, but I think the pressure is on Mike Tressel now here in year 3 to show that you can move things forward. And it's going to be complicated by the opponents you're going to face, but you just, like everything about this program, you got to be better in year 3.
Yes, I think because of how good Wisconsin had been before on defense, it colors your opinion on Mike Tressel. That said, if they were giving up 250, 300 yards a game on through the air, okay. If you're giving up 300 and some odd yards to Iowa on the ground, this team has prided itself, this program has prided itself on stopping the run, and it was so good for so long at being able to do that. When it doesn't happen, it's really just a shot to the gut every single time. And those are, for me, those are just so much more difficult to deal with when a team is just saying we're stronger, we're better in a number of different facets, and we're just going to ram it down your throat. That's what Wisconsin used to do to teams. And now it happened last year. And it's really happened the first 2 years, for being fair, of teams being able to do that to Wisconsin. And that, I think, is as annoying and as aggravating as anything that happens on defense for the Badgers.
Yeah, and it's not like Jim Leonard's defense didn't have games where it was just a clunker. I mean, even against Nebraska, I can remember when Nebraska threw for like 1,000,000 yards, but Wisconsin still found a way to win. But it's the consistent nature of the beatdowns that have taken place that really raise your eyebrow. And you're right, it is all relative. It's because of how good the defense was. On the other hand, that should be the standard if it's established at a certain point. And if you've built your entire program around run the ball, stop the run, you got to be able to figure out how to do that. And certainly, as we've mentioned all offseason, that Iowa game really was the impetus behind a lot of these changes. Yes, there were some other poor performances defensively, no doubt about it. They gave up 40+ points in 3 games, but you just cannot have that happen against a team like Iowa. So we can get into the changes they've made, which some of which we've discussed, some of which I tried to illustrate maybe that we had not heard before defensively, but they put a lot of work into making sure that it's going to be structurally different and just the approach will be different.
Let's jump into that in a second. I just wanted to mention, when we're talking about the defense and their struggles at getting after the quarterback and also, getting TFLs, a lot of that had to do with them being in very third and short situations more often than not last year. At least it felt that way, that there were just not nearly as many 3rd and 8 plus when you can pin your ears back and get after it as there had been previous years. So I think that might play a role in that a little bit. I'm not giving them any kind of a break on that. I'm just saying that maybe there were less opportunities. But let's jump into some of the things maybe we haven't talked about. So what are some of the changes that they made that we haven't discussed ad nauseum here throughout the offseason?
Well, what we've talked about regularly is how they've changed the D-line, how there's more 300+ pounders. I mentioned this in the story. They averaged 316 pounds in the top 6, where the top 6 a year ago were 295 pounds. We've talked about some of the changes in body types on the edge. I think the 2 things that stood out when I was putting together the story, one, Luke Fickell apparently had given a lot of presentations to the team, putting up various statistics, including some advanced stats. I think this goes to trying to establish a mindset and help them understand the importance of certain things. But like a lot of the guys were talking about how he presented some advanced stats about what happens when a defense allows 2 or more explosive plays in a game. And surprisingly, that's one area where Wisconsin actually wasn't bad a year ago. They were tied for 15th in the country in terms of surrendering plays of at least 20 yards, but they weren't good in TFLs. They were last. They were tied for 110th in takeaways. And I had this stat that over the last 5 years, FBS versus FBS games, teams had a 474 winning percentage when the defense allowed multiple 20+ yard plays. And then that winning percentage went up to 838 when they allowed just one 20-yard play or fewer. And I thought that was really fascinating. Like, yeah, it's obvious. Oh, the more explosives you give up, the worse you are. But those were the kinds of things that the players were talking about, was really eye-opening for them and allowed them to focus on specific things. And there are other things that aren't necessarily advanced stats. They were not good. Red zone defense. Their red zone touchdown percentage was like 62%. They obviously, in games where they didn't win the rushing battle, they lost. But I thought that started in the offseason, and apparently it continued into fall camp when they were down in Platteville. And then the other element of this is just so hard to define. It's like when people talk about the culture of the team and how different it is, the mindset being different. And yet every single person you talk to about the defense uses that word or mentality. And Mike Tressel was talking about it even before fall camp started, that he felt like it was going to be different. He mentioned a year ago, it seemed like the defense was simply trying to just essentially hang on for dear life, is how he put it, which is not something anybody wants to hear. But now there's just a different mindset. But I also frame this at the end of my story. Like, that's great. And hopefully for the Badgers, it works. And also that has to be extremely frustrating for all fans to hear. Like, now you're talking about these things in year 3. Certainly there's a feeling out process, but like, it's taken you 2 years to get to some of these places. Ultimately, you need the players. And so the hope is they have better players now, but they also need to be positioned well enough to perform. And I guess not feel like if something goes awry, oh crap, here it goes again. Because that's another thing that Tressel talked about. Like, he felt like he noticed that in camp. all right, you gave up a play and now you gave up an 8-yard gain. There isn't that sort of deflation. It's like, okay, one more play and we're back in charge of this series. And so that's really hard to define, but it's at least something everyone's talking about.
I mean, the deflating nature of last year, and Fickle has talked about it a ton, is just the inability to move on to the next thing, to not let one bad play or one bad game or one bad moment kill your season or kill that particular game or kill that particular drive. And that happened just a ton last year. And that's, I think, for me, when you talk about the red zone defense and the touchdown percentage there, that is blinking lights. That's just, like, once they get in the red zone, we're screwed. We can't bounce back from anything that bad that has happened. And we know that happened from game to game, right? The never bounced back from the Penn State game, and you got drilled by Iowa. Didn't bounce back from the Oregon game, got drilled by Nebraska, and then obviously Minnesota as well. And they just did not handle negatives well last year at all. And we saw that play out. And if you're able to play 4 quarters against Penn State and play 4 quarters against Oregon, you should be able to play 4 quarters against Iowa and play 4 quarters against Nebraska and Minnesota. And that just did not happen. And that's how you lose 5 straight games to end the season. It's just, and I mean, you can put that on a number of places. Ultimately, it comes down to the head coach for sure, and the inability to keep your team invested throughout an entire season. And I think he recognized that, right? I mean, he's made that clear. And I think another interesting aspect of this whole being able to move on thing, and it comes down to leadership. They're not having captains this year, or at least game to game. They're not having like season long captains this year. And I don't recall the last time Wisconsin's done that. I feel like it's been a while.
Yeah, I don't know the last time now Luke talked about this. There's going to be a game to game captain. Somebody's got to go out there, a handful of guys for the coin flip, all that stuff. But he has talked about there's a leadership council among this group. There are 14 people on that leadership council. And he feels like for the good of the team this year, and every season is different, he wants to lean on those guys. And he also said, ultimately, when you get to the end of the year, you can look back on the season and say, these were the leaders of the team. But you also don't want to be in a spot where, I think he's probably experienced this in his years as coach. Once you name captains, then maybe there's a shift among other guys. Like, oh, I'm not a captain. Maybe my role isn't as important. Or you are a captain and you start to think differently. And so, I mean, it's nice to have captains who went to Big Ten Media Days. I think that says a lot. Jake Renfro, Ricardo Hallman, Billy Edwards Jr. But if you've got more of those types of players and you really believe there are 14 that are worthy of that distinction, and you've got all these guys on the leadership council, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, whatever it takes to win games.
Right. What I'm saying is I think it keeps guys invested a little bit more, and you have more guys to bring along, and you're not just, the young guys are looking up to a bunch of different guys as opposed to just 3 or 4 guys. The Packers used to do this. They used to do, under Mike McCarthy, they wouldn't do season-long captains. They wouldn't actually have like named captains until the playoffs and when they had to put the patches on and all that good stuff in the NFL. But they would just have game-to-game captains. You knew who the leaders were. You didn't necessarily need the captains thing, but it allowed more guys to lead. And I guess maybe in this nature, it will as well. I feel like we're just talking about so many things that don't, like, we're looking and for things that matter. And at the end of the day, it's executing what you're supposed to do. And that, whether it's no pre-snap penalties, whether it's knowing where you're supposed to line up, knowing like just that stuff. And I thought that was interesting hearing from Billy Edwards Jr. yesterday when he was talking about because they want to be in a mid-season form right away. And when he was talking about what mid-season form looks like for him, it's just doing the little things that you should be doing. No pre-snap penalties, lining up where you're supposed to be. If I'm asking you to run a 5-yard hitch, you're going to run a 5-yard hitch, and it's not going to be a 7-yard hitch, and like that type of stuff. And you're just playing pitch and catch with guys. That's such a low bar to reach, but it's also kind of indicative of what the last couple of years were. So go ahead. You're about to say something.
It's a total aside, but you know what I was thinking when he was talking, and I know we had him on the show, but I couldn't help but think, God, I wish this dude was here for another 4 years. Now, fans may feel differently at the end of the year. He is legitimately the best talker as a quarterback that I think I've covered, which is very refreshing. Maybe it'll be different if Wisconsin doesn't perform well or he doesn't perform well. I wouldn't anticipate that to be the case. You ask him a question, he will give you an expansive answer, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. And so that's refreshing.
Yeah, I certainly understand it from that point of view. And if I was a writer, I probably would like that as well, just because it gives you a lot of an ability to choose from quotes, and you have a lot to work with there. As somebody who's trying to cut that up into like 20-second clips, not as easy. But I do appreciate that he doesn't really duck any answers either, right? Like anything you ask him, you're going to get a worthwhile and thought about answer. He's not just, and we've dealt with some of those. Like Graham was good at that for the most part. Most of the other quarterbacks Wisconsin's had, at least since we've been there, were not necessarily guys that wanted to talk at all. Whether it was Alex Hornibrook or Jack Cohn or Tanner Mordecai was fine, but that wasn't something he wanted to do. Same thing with Tyler Van Dyke. Joel Stabby would give you answers, but towards the end of his thing, he was kind of done. Bart Houston was fun to talk to. He was always laughing in the middle of his answers. So trying to think who else. You covered Russell Wilson. I would assume he was very expansive.
He was the most buttoned up guy ever. I think I told this story before, but I did a one-on-one interview with him, and I'll keep it short because we got other stuff we want to talk about. But I did a one-on-one interview with him in 2011 in the middle of that season. And the story was he'd been drafted by the Rockies. It was like, what's he going to do? Is he going to do baseball, football? It seems pretty clear the direction things are headed. But the guy was pretty good at baseball. And I talked to him for like 30 minutes, and I went back home and I transcribed the interview, and I was like, wow. He made me feel so good while I was there, and I don't think he said anything notable at all, which is kind of Russell Wilson, but it's worked for him for so long. Either way, this season, I will appreciate having covered all these quarterbacks, what it's like covering Billy Edwards Jr. And I asked him a question, too, about like the importance of getting some confidence. I think I wanted to ask the confidence for the team necessarily, and it was – I think he interpreted it as, and maybe I was asking this anyway, but confidence, like giving fans confidence. And I thought it was a good answer that like, it's something that he's acknowledged and talked about with the guys, like essentially no disrespect to the fans who are looking for confidence, but we have to worry about ourselves. And there are a lot of things that we have to do to focus on this game. So just one example of, I thought was a really good answer from Billy.
Yeah. He's a positive guy, right? But I think Jake Renfro is also one of those guys that's just ultra positive, and he's trying to speak it into existence. And I asked him about that when we were out in Vegas, and he kind of felt the same way yesterday. Like he is trying to be a guy that is speaking about things positively and thinking positively, and he thinks it's going to rub off on other guys. And that probably is something that is needed. It doesn't always have to be bad all the time, and especially before a season. There's nothing bad has happened yet. In terms of like football, yes, some of the injuries haven't been good, but nothing bad has happened to this team yet. You have this ability to decide what your season is going to be. And so why think about it negatively? And that's, he has been very, that's been very evident with him. I will say that for sure. Even going back to spring ball is very, very, very positive. And I don't think that's a bad thing at this point. It's okay. Like you can be self-critical, but also be positive. And I certainly think maybe they need a little pick me up sometimes when the last 2 years are brought up. So
yeah, I would say hope springs eternal this time of year, as I always say, as it should. But I do think there is some internal excitement about what they feel like they're trying to build, offensively specifically, maybe defensively as well. But yes, they were talking about how excited they were 2 years ago. It just feels like these guys have a greater sense of confidence in what they're going to be asked to do this year, even if it is more complex in many ways.
Yeah, offensively, you asked him like whether this offense was easier to learn or not. And,
yeah.
And I was like, I mean, that was not a complicated offense the last couple of years.
Yeah, I don't think I meant it like, oh, the variety of plays. I think maybe I just need to be better in how I frame the questions. Like, because of the style that they're being asked to do. Like when Jake, and I know he didn't end up playing in year one, basically, but it was such a departure from anything pretty much most of those guys had ever done. Whereas this year it feels more like what football has been for a lot of these guys. But I appreciated his answer nonetheless.
All right. Before we jump into the picks, I wanted to bring a couple of things up. One, which is related to tomorrow night, and I don't know how many people actually are going to be affected by this, but we will be, and that is YouTube TV and Fox at odds right now. And if there's no deal by 5 o'clock here on Wednesday as we're talking, all the Fox networks are going to be pulled from YouTube TV, which for our purposes is going to include Big Ten Network. So not great. Again, we're going to be there, so we won't miss it. But how do you watch games on your computer?
YouTube TV. Yeah, let me say this though. I've had YouTube TV for a while now, and obviously I'm not an expert on what goes on behind the scenes by any means. I get these emails every year, and it's whatever network and YouTube TV, and people freak out, and then it's resolved in the 11th hour. So I feel like this will be figured out at some point, and that we won't go the whole season, and you can't get Fox, but that would really suck if it happened.
Yeah, well, again, I'm just mentioning it here, and I got a number of messages my way, and I mentioned this on Twitter that there are other options, and you don't even have to pay for anything. You can just use this box, and you can just stream it illegally. And I was, it is what it is. But I don't know if Wisconsin and Miami, Ohio are going to be enough to tilt the things in different directions. I will say that I think Texas and Ohio State certainly would. And while that can be seen over the air, how many people are watching stuff over the air these days? I will, because when I have like multiple TVs, I will have like that over the air signal just on one of them. But I don't know how many people are doing it. So yeah. And also YouTube TV is certainly becoming like cable at this point too, where the price is going up, and yeah, not great. But we're eventually going to get back to this where there's going to be bundles of all these little streaming services, and it's going to essentially be called cable once again. But the other odds and ends, the Maryland athletic director did an interview, I think it was this week at some point, and the Big Ten's planning to expand again, at least according to him. Said, how many teams by 2030, how many teams are going to be in the Big Ten? He said 20. I don't know what those teams are going to be. I don't know what the college football looks like in 5 years, but I'm done with expansion. I'm done with all the business side of college athletics, and which is too bad, because it's going to be essentially what this sport has turned into from January to September is business, and none of it is fun for fans. However, we're to the part where it actually is fun for fans, and that is the games. We're going to be getting going on Thursday night. Let's talk about some of the games here that are happening this weekend, and I will take care of that. And I don't know, at some point, week one's a little bit tough. We haven't really talked about a potential bet, but I wouldn't mind a potential bet, Jesse.
What, for the season?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you've clearly thought about this. What do you have in mind?
No, I haven't. I haven't thought about it. I need to think about it a little bit more, but I think there should be a real bet this time, and we'll come up with it. We'll see how week one goes, how bad it's going to be. If I get murdered here in week one, then it's probably not going to be too bad of a bet. If I roll in week one, maybe it'll be more serious.
All right.
We'll how I'm working here. How I'm working here.
Gotcha.
All right. So we'll pick some of the bigger games of the week. We'll start with Virginia Tech going to South Carolina. South Carolina is actually ranked, I believe, 13th in the country. That is not on the graphic, but they were 13th in the country and are 8-point favorites against the Hokies.
I took my copious notes here so everybody can see.
I literally sent this list to you about 10 minutes before we started. So that's about the extent of the, of the research.
All right. I'm going with South Carolina. I'm basing a lot of this on quarterback play because I'm not going to sit here and say I know a lot about these teams that we haven't seen play that all have 40 new dudes. But Lenora Sellers had an amazing season as a redshirt freshman for South Carolina. He threw for 2,500 yards and 18 touchdowns. And so I feel like when you've got a quarterback that's a potential top level NFL draft pick, you ride those coattails all day when you don't know anything about these teams.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, especially he's a guy that's going to be potentially in the Heisman conversation. If South Carolina stays where it is in the rankings and is a player in the SEC, he was dynamic. He was electric last year. So I'm going to take South Carolina as well. Number 8, Alabama, traveling to Florida State to take on easily the most disappointing team in college football a year ago in the Seminoles. But Alabama, a 13.5-point favorite there.
Okay, I got this quote pulled up here. So Florida State's quarterback, Tommy Castellanos, said this offseason. They don't have Nick Saban to save them. I just don't see them stopping me. Last year, Western Kentucky's quarterback, TJ Finley, before the opener said, they might not be who they think they might be. Alabama won that game 63-0. Finley threw for 92 yards with 2 interceptions. I just don't think, especially if you're at a program that just went 2-10, you're in a position to say something like that. I think Alabama is absolutely using something like that as bulletin board material and will cover.
That quarterback that you mentioned, Tommy Castellanos, was at Boston College last year. Was actually pretty good at Boston College. I saw him play, but Boston College and didn't see Alabama a ton last year, I don't think. And or the type of Alabama teams or teams like Alabama. I don't know that Boston College saw a lot of those. So I'm going to take Alabama on the road. It's a bigger number, but it's Alabama, dude. And they obviously are going to be starting a new quarterback this time around. But Kalen DeBoer, year 2 in his system and just getting more of his feel around it, I think they roll in that one. Western Illinois, the Leathernecks, traveling to Champaign to take on number 12 Illinois, who is a 45.5-point favorite over Western Illinois.
This is such a massive number. Illinois opened the season a year ago against Eastern Illinois and won 45-0. On the other hand, Western Illinois played one Big Ten team a year ago. It was Indiana, and the Hoosiers won 77-3. So I'm conflicted here. I think Illinois is going to destroy Western Illinois. I just don't think I can pick Illinois to cover when it's 45.5. Maybe they only win 45-0. So because that's my other option, Western Illinois will somehow manage to cover the spread.
I think Brett Bielema's going to.
The card said go for 2 when we were up 61-0.
Yes.
You might be right.
I think that is what's going to happen. They have obviously a lot of new guys. A lot of the 3 of the Wisconsin guys down there now playing along the defensive line / outside linebacker there with Leon Lowry and James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal. But they also have a really good offense, really good passing game with Luke Altmaier back for, I believe this is year number 3 as a starter. That said, I will note, Illinois won a lot of close games last year. A lot of close games. You would hope if you're a team or you're somebody that does not root for Illinois that it would go the other way a little bit. I don't think that's going to matter on Saturday. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying being 12th in the country is based a lot on what happened a year ago, and they won a ton of close games. And if they can continue to do that, great. But if you're Brett Bielema, great. We'll see. I'm going to take Western Illinois. No, excuse me. No. Excuse me. I'm going to take Illinois. That's what I meant. Right. Notre Dame on the road, going down to Miami, take on the Hurricanes down there. Notre Dame, a 2.5-point favorite at Hard Rock Stadium.
Well, we all know what a difficult place to play that place is.
Yes.
Look, CJ Carr, go ahead.
I'll let you finish, but there's going to be just a ton of Notre Dame people there, right? That place is probably, it's at Miami, but there's going to be a ton of Notre Dame people there.
CJ Carr obviously has a bunch of talent. He appeared in one game, hasn't thrown a college pass. I don't know. Carson Beck had a most interesting offseason, but I'm just going to take Carson Beck and the Fighting Lamborghinis to win this game.
I was going to say, what kind of offseason did he have?
Interesting.
Do you know that he was dating one of the Cavender twins?
Of course I did.
Yeah, and the other
Crash's Lambo. Is that what it was?
I don't remember exactly, but the other twin, the only reason I bring up the twins is because the other one is now engaged to former Wisconsin tight end Jake Ferguson. So you're going to take Miami. I'm going to take Notre Dame going down there and getting that win. CJ Carr burns Xavier Lucas for a touchdown.
I see what you did there.
Yep. Another top 10 matchup, LSU on the road at Clemson. The Tigers of the orange variety are 3.5-point favorites.
I'm going to go Clemson. Again, elite level quarterback. What's a different word I can use that isn't elite that will be acceptable, by the way, on this program?
I mean, great, amazing, fantastic, high level.
All right. Fantastic quarterback, Cade Klubnik, maybe number 1 pick. This is probably Clemson's best offense in years. So I will pick Clemson.
There's a high level quarterback on the other side, right?
With Garrett Nussmeier. I like the home team. I like the home team.
Yeah, no, I get it. Garrett Nussmeier and LSU, Brian Kelly on the hot seat a little bit to get something done this year. Now they're 9th in the country. LSU just, when we're talking about hot seat, I'm saying you need to be in the playoff. You need to be challenging for that type of stuff, or you may not be there. And I think that certainly could be the case for Brian Kelly. The danger of bringing in a guy from the outside that you're bringing from the north, and then he turns into having a southern accent down there at LSU. I'm going to take Clemson as well. Big one on what's up?
My family. That was just terrible. But
my family. Number 1 Texas on the road at number 3 Ohio State, and the number 1 team in the country, an underdog. They are a 2.5-point underdog to the Fighting Buckeyes, and Arch Manning finally taking over as the number 1 quarterback there. Julian Sand getting his first start for Ohio State. You talk about high level quarterbacks. I mean, this is, if that's your deciding factor here, I think I know where you're going.
I'm going to go Ohio State.
He's not going where I thought he was going.
I'm riding with the Big Ten on this. I don't know. That'd be a tough place to go in for your first game, even if you are the number 1 team in the country, which has not happened at Texas before. So it's going to be awesome. I mean, the game of the week, clearly.
Wait, Texas has never been the number 1 team in the country to start a season?
I think so. Am I wrong about that?
That just seems crazy to me. That's
Maybe
insane.
I should Google it.
Go for it. That's insane to me. Texas themselves, obviously, Arch Manning is Arch Manning.
First time.
That is crazy. I think when you think about how good they've been for how long they've been good, and not to be a number 1 team to start a season ever, that's insane. Texas,
AP top 25.
Yeah. Texas, so probably number 1 in the coaches poll at some point.
I don't know.
Yeah. Irrelevant. Coaches poll is relevant, so we're talking about the AP poll. Texas defense is actually really, really good too. Like they have one of the better defensive lines in the country. I'm going to take Texas. I don't know if they win, but I think they can cover 2.5. And I know it's a small number, but I think they can cover 2.5. And then, I mean, you said game of the week. I don't know about that. Game of the week coming up: Miami of Ohio coming to Wisconsin. Badgers 17.5-point favorites, and a whole lot of new faces on both sides, but the faces that we care about on the Wisconsin side. What say you?
I think Wisconsin's going to cover. It's a tough one. It's a good number, but I just think that the Badgers have a lot of guys who are ready to prove something. The structure makes more sense, as we've said the entire offseason. I know that Miami has a good quarterback and quality players from Power 4 levels and a program that has won the last 2 years. I still think Wisconsin is going to kind of smash them in the mouth earlier than what we've seen and roll in this one.
Do you feel more good about or do you feel better about the offense or defense in this one?
That's a good question. I guess I'd be inclined to say the defense, even though they've got a lot of question mark. I don't know, man. The quarterback situation at Miami concerns me a little bit. There's a lot of guys on the offensive side that I don't necessarily know what to expect. Guys taking on bigger roles, and it's the same defensively, but I guess I'll pick the defense.
I mean, it's a tough question for sure. For you, do you have a score?
Still formulating in my head, but I'll go 38-10.
Okay. I'm going to go 34-17. which would mean them not covering. I think I picked 35-20 earlier this week on the morning show. I don't feel good about. I hope they come out just so that we have a different narrative coming out of this one than we've had the last few years, and I'm all about the narratives. Give us something else to talk about. Go and pound them, so we're not having to. Have the same conversations that we've had the last couple of years coming out of the opener and all the things that did not go well. But I'll say 34-17. And what I'm literally looking forward to is seeing the bracelets. Those things look amazing. Went to the Morgan Wallen concert this summer and they had those, and it's just an absolute vibe. Just absolute vibe. It's insane. So looking forward to that as well.
We've got 4 or 5 different picks this week, so I'm sure it'll even out in the wash, and we'll have the same record somehow. But at least we're got some variety this week. Starting out different for sure.
And we'll see how this first week goes, and that'll determine what kind of bet we're going to make. All right, Jesse, looking forward to tomorrow night. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach. Let's see some football.
What'd you say?
I said, let's see some football.
Let's see some football. All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Camp.